Welcome to Group 6 presentation. Our group have 5 members. This is our table content.
Global slavery is one of the darkest undercurrents of our modern world. It is not always visible and it does not always wear chains, but it traps over 50 million people through threats, deception, and power imbalances. In Afghanistan, the key factors are first, porous borders and weak law enforcement allow trafficking networks to thrive. Second, global demand for cheap products pushes poor families into debt bondage and child labor. Third, humanitarian aid restrictions leave communities vulnerable, leading to increased exploitation. Fourth, refugees without legal protection are easy target to forced labor and trafficking abroad. Fifth, criminal networks exploit the instability, deepening corruption and weaken state control. Forced labor traps families in brick and opium fields farm. Child slavery forces children as young as 5 into street work and weaving, robbing them of education and safety. Forced and early marriages harm girls and women physically and emotionally. Sexually exploitation, including the practice of bacha bazi, inflicts deep trauma on boys and girls, and transactional trafficking leads Afghans into forced labor and even organ trade across Pakistan, Iran, and other Gulf.
Building on what we've just heard, I want to talk about modern slavery in Afghanistan, not just a human rights issue, but as a serious threat to its society, economy, and politics. Socially, over a million children work in dangerous jobs like mining and popping farming, most from displaced or poor families. Girls are banned from school and often forced into marriage just to survive. And with over 80 laws restricting women's freedom, gender inequality is now built into the system. This isn't just hurting individuals, it's breaking social bonds, blocking education, and making inequality permanent. Economically, nearly three-quarters of Afghanistan's GDP comes from informal work. That means no contracts, no rights, and no protections. Forced labor and child labor have become the norm, not the exception. This creates an economy that can't grow, can't be taxed, and can't be rebuilt, trapping the country in long-term poverty. Politically, the Taliban does little to prevent forced labor or child conscription, and in many areas, they rely on it. Over half a million people live in slavery-like conditions. This shows a government that rules through fear, not law, one that no country can fully trust or recognize. In conclusion, modern slavery in Afghanistan is a structural threat. How can these issues be addressed? Let's turn to the next part.
So given the multi-dimensional threats above, what measures they take to combat global slavery? So looking at the worldwide first, we have international legal frameworks and conventions, national level initiatives, NGOs, and corporate actions. These global measures show some success, like eliminating forced labor in Uzbekistan's cotton industry, but enforcements remain weak globally. Afghanistan initially followed this global framework, so before 2021, the country criminalized trafficking under the 2017 Penal Code, and they adopted a national action plan against it. They partner with international organizations and conduct law enforcement trainings and awareness campaigns. But everything changed after the Taliban took over. They halt progress and even reverse it catastrophically. People are trapped in forced labor, girls banned from school, making them more vulnerable to trafficking. Taliban officials are also complicit in exploitations like bachabazi and forced marriage. Poverty rates increased to 50% in 3 years. So looking back at the changes in Afghanistan, we can find that even strong international frameworks means nothing without political enforcement and financial support. So looking back at the changes in Afghanistan,
I'll be now talking about ethical concerns. Let's begin by looking at how children in Afghanistan are being exploited. Many girls are forced into marriage at a very young age, not because of tradition alone, but also because their families are too poor to survive otherwise. In some areas, like Butkis, girls as young as 9 are married off to settle debts or get food. On the other hand, Bachabazi, the abuse of young boys by powerful men, still continues even though it was banned years ago. This happens because laws are not enforced properly and people in power often protect each other instead of the victims. Both these practices highlight how poverty and corruption put children at risk. Now let's talk about how companies are involved. In the carpet industry, children work long hours in unsafe workshops with little protection. Even when companies say their products are ethically made, there's often no real system in place to check. We also see abuse in mining of lapis lazuli, a valuable bluestone. Armed groups use forced labor to control mining areas, and these materials end up in global markets. When companies don't check where their products come from, they may unknowingly support modern slavery. That's why stronger rules and accountability are urgently needed. Lastly, we look at the role of government. In many cases, Afghan police and military ignore trafficking or are paid to stay quiet. Victims often don't get justice because cases are delayed or covered up through bribes and tribal pressure. Even when abuse is reported, some areas don't have enough trained child protection workers. This leaves children completely unprotected. When leaders fail to act, it shows a breakdown of trust and responsibility, and the people who suffer most are the vulnerable.
Hi, my name is Hung. I will introduce Australian Slavery Act 2018. The purpose of Global Slavery Act is to address and mitigate the risks related to modern slavery in supply chain, but require big companies and organizations to submit an annual report dealing with their procedure and initiative. The key focus is to examine various exploitative forms, including forced labor, human trafficking, and forced marriage. For the reporting requirement, we have businesses with revenue over 100 million, the Commonwealth government entity, and the entity would have volunteered to comply with the requirement of this act. The Slavery Act statement have five components. One is the organization structure and operation, supply chain risk, action taken to access and address risk, effectiveness of the action, and the consultation process. Moving on to the operational goal, we have created public awareness about modern slavery, established central repository through online register, promote diligence in business operation, foster collaboration between government and businesses, and finally support victims to improve identification and assistance. Moving on to strength and limitation, for the strength, we have increased awareness, transparency, and encourage practice. For the limitation, we have compliance variability because different businesses have different standards for the compliance, the lack of penalty, and the limited scope because the act excludes smaller enterprise. Moving into Global Slavery Act breaches, we have exploitation of temporary foreign workers. Some of the examples can be saying like paying cash, and another example is forced marriage. Welcome to the company case study, Telstra. Telstra, an Australian leading telecommunication company, their purpose to build a connected future so that everyone can thrive. Is their company based on three principles: look beyond, work at one, and make a difference. Moving on to the positive outcome, we have whistleblowing solution where employees from all ranks can report the situation anonymously. Second is their supply chain management, so evaluating and reduce risk of forced labor. Some of them like supplier diligence process, modern slavery risk assessment, supplier framework, regular audit, stakeholder consultation, and public disclosure. Some of the negative outcome we can say that is the audit ineffectiveness, solution challenges, limited supplier accountability, limited enforcement mechanism, and the risk of forced labor. Thank you for watching.